Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is a review of the 1998 sequel, Halloween H20. Now that's some high quality H2O. Ironically enough, this film really is like a nice ice cold bottle of water. It's not the go-to beverage that you're going to go for when it comes to a horror film, a slasher movie, or even an installment in the Halloween franchise. But it's satisfying enough and it does quench your thirst. For me personally, this is the last decent, solid film in the series. It was nothing but downhill after H2O for me personally. And the film is still affected by the next installment in terms of how they try to completely retcon and erase the really powerful and effective ending for this particular movie. Now, this is a film that initially was not intended to be a theatrical movie. Dimension, I think, their first plans for Halloween 7 were going to be in the direct-to-video realm. It was going to be a direct-to-video sequel, and it was going to be in the vein of those Children of the Corn sequels that were also released direct-to-video. And it was going to be a lower budget, and it was going to deal with an all-girls boarding school, and there was going to be some relative of Michael's that they decided to just pull out of a hat, and Michael was going to get involved somehow, and it was going to be a really cheap, down and dirty slasher movie. The screenwriter, Robert Zappia, he was the guy who penned the original script for this version of Halloween 7, but that ultimately did not get shot because Jamie Lee Curtis heard that they were going to do another Halloween film, and she expressed interest in doing a sequel to return to the Halloween franchise 20 years later after the release of Halloween. And that completely caused everything to shift gears at Dimension. And with a COD, Jamie Lee wants to do it, then this is going to be a theatrical film. And her decision to return to this franchise is really what injected some new blood into it. Even though it's old blood, it was still strong enough of a transfusion to this franchise to provide it some more legitimacy, to actually give it something that had been sorely lacking with the last two installments in the franchise. And it made the right decision by just ignoring Halloween 4, 5, and 6, and just being a direct sequel to Halloween 2, because that way they don't have to deal with the hoops or deal with all of the just absolute I'm trying to think of the right word, the pitfalls, so to speak, that were in place due to the Thorn storyline and all this other shit. And Steve Miner was brought on to direct the film, but apparently John Carpenter was highly sought after to direct this movie, and I think he actually was considering doing it if he was paid $10 million, but Dimension decided not to pay him $10 million because they thought that was too much. And on one hand I get it, but on the other hand I really think that they should have just given him the money, because he definitely earned it. He's honestly probably the biggest reason why the 1978 film was as successful as it was. You take out Carpenter and you have the film directed by anybody else, I don't think it really would have been as big of a movie, let alone have as much of an impact on the horror franchise, or not it would, in terms of like actually creating a franchise, but it also would not have had much impact on the horror genre as a whole if Carpenter was not the one who is behind the camera. And he didn't get a lot of the profits from Halloween over the years. So this was a way for him to try to get that back. And I feel that, they should have paid it forward and given him the opportunity to direct what was initially planned to be the final installment in the Halloween series, to be the the end cap to Halloween and Halloween 2. But they didn't decide to give Carpenter what he wanted, so they brought in Steve Miner. And Steve Miner, I thought his direction was actually still really good. I thought he did a great job directing this film. Especially his pick for cinematographer. I think the fact that he had already worked with Darren Okada previously in a lot of other projects really did pay off with this particular film, because this movie has some really great looking shots in it. I love the way this film is shot from a cinematography perspective, how the camera moves, how it pans, how the zooms are used throughout the movie. There's some really wonderful tracking shots, and I think in large part that's due to the already fine-tuned collaboration between Steve and Darren. And Steve had already, really shown his mettle and really sharpened his knives previously with other installments in, horror franchises like Friday the 13th. So this wasn't something that was completely new to him. And yeah, I felt Steve, he was a solid pick, and I really do feel that, it is a missed opportunity not to get Carpenter, but getting Steve Miner was still a really good get for this film. But really what makes this film work when it works is Jamie Lee Curtis. Jamie Lee is on her A game with this particular role here, playing Laurie Strode 20 years later, dealing with PTSD after the first encounter that she had with Michael Myers all those years ago. And I actually feel the way that the PTSD is handled in H2O is better than how it's handled in the 2018 film, but that's just me personally. And it's just really nice to see Jamie Lee Curtis return to the franchise. And it's honestly like she never left. She still had the same tenacity that she displayed in 1978 and in 1981 here in H2O. That being said, as much as I love her performance in this film, as much as I love the fact that we get to see Laurie go toe-to-toe with Michael Myers one last time, she's, other than maybe a couple other performances in the film, she's the only actor or actress in the movie that really delivers a A-plus performance. And you have a lot of other actors and performers that are just adequate at best, or honestly pretty below average or below par, because they don't really leave much of an impression. They don't really have that much genuine charisma or personality. The screenplay doesn't also give them that much to work with, so they feel very one note. And even someone like LL Cool J, who's a very charismatic person, doesn't really come across that way in H2O. They're trying to, with him being this guy who's working as a security guard at the private school, but he's also trying to write a romance novel. But it all comes across as really forced to me. The comic relief wasn't funny. And then you have this whole he's dead, but then he's not really dead thing with the screenplay. And I just don't feel they really handled him that well in this movie. I think he was dealt with better in something like Deep Blue Sea or in Any Given Sunday. His little role in that. But yeah, I still feel that it's a film that is missing something when it comes to the cast, but it's not to the point where the film completely falls apart due to that absence. Because you still have the main focal point as strong as it is with Jamie Lee Curtis. Adam Arkin, he's fine too as Will Brennan. I just wish there were more scenes with him and Jamie Lee, and just more scenes in general, because he had some good chemistry with Curtis, and he was actually pretty funny and likable in his own right. Michelle Williams, I just really didn't care for her character, and the performance really was nothing to write home about. Adam Hann-Byrd as Charlie, another bit of comic relief that I could take or leave. Same things, you have Jodi Lynn O'Keefe as Sarah. I honestly found her to be every bit as interesting or memorable of a character as, you know, a similar character in Halloween 6. And I don't even remember that character's name. So that's how much of an impact that character left on me. Josh Hartnett plays John Tate, Laurie's son. And I thought Josh Hartnett actually, he was pretty good here. I thought he had a really good sequence with Curtis where he's upset at how much his mother is smothering him. And I thought it came across as very authentic. But he just was wasted in the film, though. Even though it was a good performance, like, especially in, like, the last 20 minutes or so, he just gets injured a little bit, and then he's pretty much sidelined for the rest of the movie. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, he's in this in the very beginning, and I don't buy him being, you know, some rough and tough hockey player, but, you know, that's just a little nitpick. But you can see why he would go on to get more roles later in his career, because he definitely did show that genuine charisma even in this little sequence. I wish that he was in the film more. I wish they didn't kill him off early on, and instead they had him as one of the main characters. Replace Adam Hann-Byrd with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and you got a better main cast. Chris Durand is Michael Myers. He was fine. I would say I prefer George P. Wilbur or Dick Warlock or Nick Castle over him. But you know, he got the job done. I feel when it comes to his flexibility, I think that really did help, because it provided him the opportunity to have some really, you know, jaw-dropping, show-stopping moments, like when Michael drops down from the ceiling. I thought that was a really great shot. And Durand did a lot of his own stunts. It helped that, you know, he was a stuntman, so he knew how to do a lot of these things. But I guess some people say, you know, he kind of lacks the size as Wilbur or some of these other, you know, actors in the suit. But I think, you know, he still held his own fairly well enough. I think the problem with him is the masks. Like, he had this really cringy, awful CGI mask in one scene that completely ruins the sequence, to be honest. Then you had the K&B mask that I think was K&B. I could be wrong. That's like super like smooth and it looks off. And then you had Stan Winston in his studio that came in and did a mask, and that's the best looking one. But that was used mostly for reshoots and some other extra sequences, so it's not in the film that much. And so yeah, it is problematic when the film constantly switches between these three different masks. So I don't feel that Chris was really given, you know, the best possible route to be as successful as he could have been as Michael Myers, because of, you know, just these distracting shifts in the masks. I think it was very distracting and really, you know, made it so he wasn't able to make the best possible impression on the audience, because the audience is looking at, you know, the CGI mask or the featureless smooth mask, or, you know, and they're just focusing too much on the masks. You also had Nancy Stevens, who came back as Marion Chambers, the smoking nurse. It was nice to see her again in her little cameo role in the beginning. Janet Leigh, who is Jamie Lee's mother. She's in this as one of I think like the headmistress or somebody who works at the school. And there's a really nice sequence between her and her daughter in the film. And, you know, not the strongest cast in the world, but, you know, it could be a lot worse. And when you have Jamie Lee Curtis and she's delivering such a powerful performance, there's enough there to make things adequate or average enough that the film is able to still be somewhat successful. The film had a really strange score. So apparently during the screenings for the test audiences, they used a temp score with music from Mimic and Scream, which were scores that were composed by Marco Beltrami. The original score was created and composed by John Ottman, but the studio and the producers, a lot of people involved with H20, didn't really feel that the score really meshed that well with the movie as a whole. So they saw how successful the temp score was with audiences. They did some test screenings with Ottman's score, and it did not go over well with the same audiences. So they decided to hire Beltrami, and he essentially just did the music from the temp score, and it's very obvious. It's a very lazy score for the most part, but there are points where the score really shines, but it's not anything that Beltrami does. The score shines with the opening credits, the opening titles by John Ottman, and some of the other pieces that you heard by John. I feel that they should have used more of his score, but I understand why they did not use all of it, because on this Blu-ray they show sequences with his score. In some of the scenes, they really don't work with the score that he made. It's too over the top. It's too operatic. It's just too orchestral. It doesn't really mix with this franchise or with this particular film. So, you know, I gotta give Dimension and everybody involved with the production kudos for trying to do the best they could to make this work. But it's something that was just doomed from the start because of how the score just didn't mesh. So they had to scramble last minute to get something in there that was somewhat cohesive, and as a result it just never really felt cohesive, because you'd have these moments where you'd hear Ottman's score and you're like, oh, that's really cool, it's really well done. I like his take on the Halloween theme. I actually don't mind the orchestral version of it, because I feel that that makes it stand out, and in a good way for me, from other films in the franchise. But then there's other bits that don't really click, and then even those bits that don't click, they're way better than this lazy temp score job by Beltrami. So yeah, the score definitely does hold the film back. The screenplay by... Sorry, I just smacked something there. Forgive me. I've been on like 3 days straight of like 8-hour like really brutal shifts at work, so I'm a little bit a little tired, so to speak. But anyway, yeah, the screenplay, it had a lot of different cooks in the kitchen. Kevin Williamson came on board, did some uncredited work. Matt Greenberg was brought on. Robert Zappia also worked with it. It seems like a lot of his stuff, though, was rewritten. I guess at one point they were going to connect this to Halloween 4 by letting Jamie Lee Curtis, letting Laurie Strode know that her daughter died, and they were going to have a scene where she would go throw up in the bathroom out of grief, but I decided to cut that out. I understand why, but still might have been a nice sequence to see, especially, you know, to see how Jamie Lee would have handled that sequence acting wise. And the script suffers from issues when it comes to the overall engagement of the story as a whole. A lot of it feels very similar to the 1978 film or to other slasher films from this particular time period. The fact that other than Jamie Lee Curtis and maybe a couple other characters, you really don't have any other characters that you really are rooting for. That definitely does hurt the film when it comes to how strong it can be when it comes to its storytelling. The lack of Loomis definitely is pretty glaring. Even though they try to have him in the opening credits, it's not very effective, and it's honestly pretty bad because you have this guy named Tom Kane who's trying to do the best impression he can of Donald Pleasence, but you can tell that it's not Donald Pleasence. Apparently, they couldn't just use Donald Pleasence's performance from the first film because there was a score or some kind of audio track that would, you know, was connected to his speech, so they couldn't take that out. So they couldn't use Ottman's score with Pleasence's monologue. So they decided, all right, we're just going to have to make it work. We're going to use Ottman's score because it's so good and we really like it. But we can't use the actual audio of Donald Pleasence saying those iconic lines, you know, about the devil's eyes and so on and so forth. And so we got to get, you know, this guy to do an impression. And they might have been better off just not even having that. I understand why they decided to go that route, but I think the better decision would have been just leave Loomis as like a picture in the room or something. Don't have some guy try to imitate Donald Pleasence, especially that soon after his death. I mean, he had only passed away, what, like 3 years prior to this film's release, so I don't know, it just felt kind of cheap, to be honest, to have this guy do a Donald Pleasence imitation, and that's like your first introduction of this film, is this obviously fake Loomis, you know, trying to recreate one of the most iconic monologues in, honestly, film history, and it just was not a good start. And the ending, I love the ending. I think the way that the ending is structured, the last 15 to 20 minutes, the showdown, the final showdown between Laurie and Michael, it's thrilling, it's exciting, it's genuinely badass stuff. It's hampered and it's hurt immensely, though, by the existence of Halloween Resurrection and its stupid bullshit Scooby-Doo switcheroo. I don't understand why that was the decision that was made. Apparently, the only reason why we got the decapitation, which, I mean, that sequence is so badass. It is such a really crowd-pleasing and rousing moment, and it would have been the perfect end cap to this franchise. Michael Myers is dead. He got his head cut off by Laurie Strode, and it's over. But Akkad, because he did not want to lose his cash cow, only agreed to settle, you know, the beef between him and the producers when it comes to this ending, and only agreed to do this ending, you know, under the realization that it's not really Michael who's getting decapitated. It's this other guy. So he can have a doorway, an opening for another film in the series. That's why Jamie Lee Curtis even shows up in Halloween Resurrection, is because it was a part of this contract. So that really does cheapen and hurt and hamper and really make this ending nowhere near as powerful and as final as it really honestly should have been. So, but I don't necessarily think that's 100% an issue with the screenwriters, because I think they intended it to be, that's it. This is the final film in the series. We intended things to be the final film in the trilogy. When she cuts his head off, he's fucking dead. They had some other ideas, like they were gonna do something where he would be in a pool and then something would happen and the floor underneath him would like fall out and he would fall into the abyss or something, and it would be left up to whether or not he lived. There was another thing about like you'd have him in the van and the van would go off a cliff or something and you'd be up in the air whether he survived the crash. But ultimately decided to go with the decapitation, and that was the best route. It really was. But it's not just the decapitation that's really well done in that last 15 to 20 minutes. It's just everything about that. Laurie Strode fighting back against Michael with her own knife. The sequence in the it's not a hospital. The sequence in the cafeteria or the classroom when Michael Myers is throwing the tables and going after Laurie. Some really, suspenseful stuff that was intended to be used in Halloween 4, but they ultimately did not have the budget to do that. But it was lifted and borrowed and used for H20. And I mean, even just the whole really tense series of moments when Michael Myers is in the body bag and Laurie, she's so desperate to finally, stop this evil that she steals the ambulance or the coroner van, and she's driving along and then Michael Myers gets up and she's got to find a way to, still stay one step ahead of him while he's in the same vehicle as she is. And he's ripping through the bag and he's literally a few feet away from her. And she presses on the brakes, sends it flying. I like the moment when it seems like he might be like manipulating her to, hold his hand so then he could grab her and kill her. But then she sees that there's nothing in his eyes, the cold, dead, lifeless eyes, and then cuts his fucking head off. And then you hear John Carpenter's iconic Halloween theme in the background, and this really badass tracking shot and pan as well. This is really, a rousing, rollicking, finale to this film and to this franchise. And there's some other rousing sequences too. When it comes to the thrills and the chills, the moment when Michael Myers is going after Josh Hartnett, his character, and his girlfriend, and they are hiding behind this gate, but Michael Myers is right there, and he's grabbing the keys, and they're pounding on the door, and they're trying to get in, and he unlocks the cage, and he's about to get him, and the door gets opened up just in time for them to get away from him before he's able to stab him. And then you have that really just iconic moment when Jamie Lee Curtis, Laurie Strode, comes face to face with Michael once again. Through the window and the door, and they have this moment where they have a stare down. Yeah, that's a really rousing sequence as well. It's just too bad that the film really doesn't get going until like 45 minutes in, and it's only an hour and 20 something minutes. It's only 86 minutes, and that's with the end credits. So it's actually a shorter film than 86 minutes. And it does drag, and I gotta be honest, that does hurt the movie. It's got some pacing problems. And I think in some ways that has to do with the script. I understand why they're doing character development. They're building the character of Laurie Strode, explaining why she faked her death, showing all this stuff, dealing with her PTSD, letting the audience in on, you know, her son and his friends and so on and so forth. But it does start to drag a little bit. It starts off with a bang with another rousing sequence with Michael Myers stalking Marion Chambers and taking out Joseph Gordon-Levitt. That was a really rousing sequence. Great way to start the film. But it starts to peter out pretty quickly after that. And I definitely would have liked the film more if it was a little tighter. If it had a little bit more going on in that what I like to call kind of a dead zone with this particular movie. There are attempts to try to keep it going with the bathroom scene, but that sequence I didn't really think was even that good. I thought that was a really lazy fake out in terms of, you know, trying to be suspenseful and scary. And speaking of that, there's way too many fake out scares in this. That's one thing I definitely did not like at all about this movie. Too many times where it's like, oh my god, it's Michael Myers. Oh no, it's not. You know, I understand why they were doing that, to try to establish Laurie's PTSD, but after a while it got really old and it felt like it was a crutch, and I think they should have thrown that away earlier. Instead of really, you know, leaning on that as much as the film ultimately did. Also, speaking of lazy stuff and things that they should not have leaned on as much, the fucking jump scares. Give me a fucking break with the music stings and oh my god, there's somebody behind them. Oh, but it's just, you know, someone's friend or that other shit. And that ties right into the fake outs. Too many fake outs and too many lazy jump scares that definitely do hurt this film. Honestly, those are the pacing, the lazy fake outs and jump scares are the three ultimate flaws that really prevent this film from being a great movie, a great sequel. It's still got its merits in other ways, in terms of the technical aspects of the production. I felt it was well edited by Patrick Lussier, and I already mentioned, you know, Darren Okada's cinematography, but I think it does beg and does, you know, it does bear some more mentions, so to speak, because I thought it was a really fine job when it comes to the way the film was shot. I like the lighting in sequences, especially during the moment when Laurie Strode knocks Michael Myers off the balcony onto the table. I really love the blue lighting in that scene. And there are moments where it does really feel like aesthetically it is along the same lines as Dean Cundey and John Carpenter's work in Halloween. But there's enough of a twist, there's enough of an extra added flavor that it doesn't feel like it's just the same thing. Like in a lot of ways, Rick Rosenthal's direction in Halloween 2 did. There still is a personal stamp by Steve Miner and Darren Okada on this film. It doesn't feel like they're just trying to do Carpenter's sloppy seconds when it comes to the direction. Yeah, I really don't know what else to say about the film. I guess other than, you know, some of the kills, you know, I like the visceral brutality of the death of Sarah. I thought that was the most effective kill. Adam Arkin's death, Will's death was clearly a homage to the nurse who got stabbed in the back by Michael in Halloween 2, but I felt in Halloween 2 that was a much more effective sequence when it comes to its visceral power. This just felt like it was just, oh look, hey, we're doing this again, but it just didn't. It wasn't really as good. It was all right. It was okay, but it wasn't on the same level of quality as that kill. And then other ones were just very forgettable. But I would say the most memorable and the most really knockout and great kill was Michael Myers getting his head cut off. But yeah, that's my thoughts on H2O Halloween 20 years later. As always, thanks for watching my review, and I'll see you later. See ya.